Perfect. Well,
So
sorry.
let me go ahead and do my, I'm sorry, it's something I have to do. Ethics told me I have to do it. The views I share here are mine alone. These are not views of the federal government of the United States of America. These are my personal views from my experiences alone. Okay, thanks.
So thank you. If we could have some of the mentors or I guess mentor panelists start just by introducing themselves and what it is they're doing, just to give a little bit of context for you know, what they're going to provide as like answers and just some advice going forward.
I think most people heard from me. It'd be great to hear from some others.
Cool, yeah. My name is Britt Savant. I'm a product designer at T3, currently supervising over the accounts for like PGA, Pods, Hallmark, State Farm, different things like that.
My name is Monique. I actually worked at T3 too, so that's pretty cool. We probably worked with some of the same people because people stay there forever. But currently I am a UX designer at Amazon working on internal tools, which is actually really different for me. First time working where my clients are my coworkers, which is really interesting. But previously I was at IBM, so working on enterprise design, so B2B. Before that I was at USAA, so working on client-facing work. And then of course at T3, also client-facing, but in an agency setting, so very different where you're working on multiple clients, things like that. So I can kind of give the perspective from working in those kinds of areas for sure.
My name is Amanda Culver. I'm a user experience designer at Frost Bank. I've been there for about 4 years now. What the design team does at Frost is we do any customer-facing digital products so that we fully control the login experience. So after you've logged in, you view all your accounts, and we work in collaboration with our marketing team on any prospect work. And then we have a say-so in some of the ATM designs, you know, anything digital, they kind of pull us in for that kind of stuff. At Frost, one of my jobs is I interview people. So I think I'm a little bit qualified to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys all for being here, especially on like a, you know, Wednesday night. We definitely really appreciate it. But I'm going to kick it off with the first question, one that Holly put in to the events and meetups channel is, you know, with UX interviews, there's often, you know, take-home projects, whiteboarding, brainstorming, etc. But how can you prepare for these tests, and what are employers looking for in their assessments from these?
Like, who wants to go?
I'll go. I guess I'll go ahead and start it off. I think it really depends on the company, right? But I think what's really nice is that the majority of them unofficially or officially will have a rubric on criteria that they're looking for, and thankfully it's pretty much the same across the board, and it's the same across pretty much any phase of the interview process too, right? So like what we're looking for in your portfolio is fairly similar to what we're going to be looking for, let's say like a live whiteboarding session, or you like walking through a portfolio piece over the phone or something like that. I think a really important part of your interview prep is going to be really digging into the company specifically, either the company website. A lot of like design specific websites also exist out there. So like IBM obviously has like a really focused, like very broad site with like their design thinking, things like that. When you see cues and things like that, you want to make sure that that is part of your interview, I guess, kind of like checklist, right? You want to make sure that you're using that kind of jargon, you're taking those things into consideration, especially if it's a company that's really into human-centered design. If it's more agency focused and it's, you know, it's not necessarily such a focus on HCD, then you tweak your interview style a little bit based on that. They might be looking for very different criteria, and typically that's reflected in their website and things like that. If you're unsure, don't be scared to reach out to the hiring manager or whoever your contact is on the other side who's setting up those meetings, don't be afraid to say like, hey, what are kind of like expectations and what am I going to be, what's kind of like, just give me as many details you can at the task at hand, like even from like timing and, you know, things like that. So yeah, I feel like that was kind of all over the place, but it's definitely do your homework beforehand to kind of see what the company style is like, and then take it from there, and make sure that you have those bullet points that you can hit when you're actually on the phone or in person with them.
Yeah, that echoes a lot of what I was going to say as well. I think to your point, it really depends. And from my experience, it's differed greatly between an agency and in-house setting. You know, so a lot of times in agency, at least from my experience, it has been, can you walk through your portfolio and things like that? But a lot of times too, once you get through that, if you can eloquently communicate your thought processes, you know, you can talk through the solutions, can, you know, have the checklist of have you worked with teams and things like that. It really comes down to, are you willing, like the type of person you are, is that somebody that they can work with 8 hours, if not more, a day? You know, if you're somebody who's personable, who can collaborate, who can really be an addition and vibe with their team, I think that's my experience from agency. In-house, it definitely is more like task-based, like test driven, things like that. And they've been different. All the in-house sort of interviews that I've been on have either been, you know, in-person whiteboarding session. It's been, here's a take-home test and what it is. But again, it's all the same sort of format of talk through your process. Can you collaborate? What are you thinking when you iterated on this solution? Things like that.
Yeah. When I was like just spewing all of that nonsense, I also forgot to cover the main points that we're looking for, that are pretty consistent throughout across, no matter where you're looking. But they want to make sure that you can actually identify the problem, right? Set the context within, you know, with the user's perspective, right? It's not just like the task at hand. It's always the user first, right? They want to see how you ideate, what's your working style, how you problem solve, and then also just like communicating those thoughts out loud, which can be difficult for some people. So I think it's really important, if you're doing like a live whiteboarding session, to actually run through it on your own before you go in there. The last thing you want to do is go in there without prepping, and just like practice talking out loud, even though it's crazy. Sometimes it feels crazy while you're on that whiteboard session, you know, going through those problems. And then also just like, especially with kind of, you know, fresh out of school, something that's also really common to look for is kind of like a growth mindset and just self-awareness. You know, we know where you are in your career and you might not know everything, but we're looking for clues that you're always trying to improve yourself and get better.
So at Frost, I don't even know what the prompt is, because they still want me to experience it at some point. So I don't even know what we interview people with, because I'm not a part of that portion. So I think to Monique's point, is practicing is essential. We recently hired someone, and he said the month leading up to his interview, he did one design challenge a week, just so that he could get the awkwardness out of verbalizing his thoughts, thinking out loud, all of that. At Frost, we focus on 3 things during an interview, and there's a variety of interviews that take place. But really what we're looking for is, does this person understand and demonstrate design thinking? Can this person collaborate and be a partner and build relationships with our stakeholders? And can this person demonstrate that they can bring money into the bank or into the company or wherever can we make profit based off of what you can bring us? So when we get into that design thinking aspect and that collaboration, relationship building aspect, that's, part of where the design challenge comes into place. And often we really don't really care where you come out with. If you give us a bicycle with 6 wheels, that's great. Did it solve the problem? Did you talk through it? Awesome. So it's really just how you think. Can you ask the right questions? Are you involving the right people? Oftentimes we will, We actually do it kind of funny at Frost. We put on hats, and each hat is a stakeholder. So maybe a product owner, maybe a vice president. You know, we assign all of the labels so that when a designer comes in and they're writing, they're like, I have a question. I think the product owner, who is a part of the business, would probably know the business rules regarding this. And so we're looking, can this person identify people, ask the right questions, bring the right people involved, and then also admit when they don't know the answers and when they're going to move on and accept this as a risk, maybe.
I would agree with all those comments. I think that practicing is a huge part of it. I think that was a great, thing to point out from Amanda, is that it's okay to not know an answer. Don't feel like you need to go into the interview and know everything that they ask you. It's okay to say, you know, I'm going to need to think about that, or I'm not quite sure. It's okay to say, I'm going to wing it here because I don't really know, or I don't have experience in that, but this is how I might handle that. But as I gain experience, I hope to learn more. Saying little things like that gives those clues that as to, look, I don't know everything. There's no way anybody can know everything. And your ability to just to be almost humble about it, about knowing that about yourself and knowing that about those that you're going to work with. How you fit in is a big part of it. Can you meld with the other team members? They're trying to assess that, and someone who feels like they know a lot or feels like they know it all is probably not going to fit very well into a team. I'm going to say it, you're like a puzzle piece. They're trying to fit you into that position. And then as you learn more, you get more experience, and you get better at your position. But don't feel like you have to know everything. Don't feel like you have to answer every single question.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing too. Like even in professional settings, right? Like now, once you get a job, things like that. You know, I remember graduating and feeling like I don't want to show that, especially coming out, you know, in that last semester where it's, you got to do all these things and get it done. It's like a fake it till you make it, and you don't want to show that weakness a little bit. You know, that humility, that acknowledging that I don't know these things, because you think it might like lessen, but in reality, I find it better to know that a teammate or whatever doesn't know these things. And even for myself to be like, throw it out there, because that sets expectations, and it doesn't have me, you know, grinding hours after the workday being like, I got to figure this out because I made a commitment that I can't do, you know? So I think that's a huge point that, you know, even I continue to grow with that, like post grad. So
Something that we do, like I mentioned, we put on hats at Frost, and it just kind of makes it all a little bit easier on everyone, not so serious. But we often identify the crabby stakeholder, the stakeholder that's going to come in and just ruin everything for you. And so I wouldn't be surprised if someone does a similar thing where they come in and they either ask you a ridiculous question, or they put a ridiculous, you know, standard on what this project should be. And it's not because they're being rude or anything, it's because those people exist in the real world, and we're trying to see how you can pivot, how you can maybe adjust the conversation, maybe how you could calm down a stakeholder to put that trust in you as a designer. So don't be surprised if you get a comment or a question that kind of feels left field. It's intentional, and they're trying to see how you can adjust based off of it.
I love the hat thing. That's so cool. I feel like I might need to steal that.
We make them out of like A4 paper, and then they end up looking like sailor hats. And
No.
it's so much better because, you know, your hat falls off and then someone laughs, and it just kind of relieves the pressure on everyone. Like no one likes to pretend like they're the crabby stakeholder, you know, like, so it's a lot of fun.
See, I didn't even realize they were paper. I wasn't picturing like a nice, like embroidered, like baseball hat that was like stakeholder, but I think that they're made out of paper is even better. I really like that.
I think we had something that kind of added on into that with the chat. I think some of you guys answered that a little bit, but asking if you always get the prompt before the interview, if you have a design challenge or a whiteboarding challenge. If anyone has anything else to add.
I think it depends on the challenge. Like I've been in some where it's like, hey, they'll give you sort of the agenda, right? But they won't give you the specific prompt or things like that. But I don't know if I've ever had an interview where they're like, this is what, you're going to do a whiteboarding and this is what you're going to be solving for. I think it really is, they want to see your initial like concepting and ideation and how you would start, because they want to see your full thought process in that given time. So.
All right, if anyone has anything to expand on it, you may go ahead and do so. If not, we can move ahead to the next question that's been submitted by the grads. All right, so one was wanting to know a little bit more about potential questions employers may ask during an interview and strategies on talking an interview through a UX case study.
This is another, I feel like, really hard one to answer because it really depends on where you're interviewing, because everyone is so different. So I know like at Amazon, everything is very data centered, and we try to make sure that we're asking questions to eliminate as much bias as possible. So we want to know as little bit about like your personal, life and even where you went to school, things like that. We don't really want to hear it because we don't want to, if I hear somebody's from Texas, I'm like, oh my God, like even just that, I'm like, yes, I want you on my team, which is terrible, right? So what they try to do is really eliminate that bias and and really focus on the data. So to do that, they're going to ask you questions that are like, tell me about a time, or things like that. And they're really wanting to hear responses with the STAR method, which is, it's really specific to Amazon, but it's really just like setting the context, talking about the task, what were the actions you took and what were the results. But that varies so drastically even from just at IBM, where they had a completely different rubric that was centered more around human-centered design, right? And the questions were more user-centered, right? It made sense, right? So it was more like, how do you problem solve? How do you do things like that? And then agency side, they wanted to know more of like how I tackled time management, right? Things like that were more of the focus, because they knew that it was going to be, higher stakes, short timelines, things like that. They want to know how you're doing under pressure, because they've kind of already seen your skill set with your portfolio. So it's less so much like proving you have the skill sets and more just kind of like, again, personality fit and do we see you on the team? Things like that. So there's really no like set of questions that you go to. Every place that I've worked in, every place that I've conducted interviews at, the questions that they wanted me to focus on were so different, really depending, even from team to team, depending on the need of what they were looking for.
Yeah, this reminds me of the conversation in our initial like meet and greet sort of thing, because everything we've said is like, it depends, and it really is that way, right? Like every company is different, every industry is different, and like when you get down to it, I think there's some general things that I always keep in mind, like no matter what questions are asked, no matter what the prompts, no matter like the whole interview process is, and I just try to stay confident and know that no matter what happens in the outcome, it's like I have something in common with these people and I can learn something and just get to know another human being. I think that is the biggest thing. And I always try to focus on some of those core, core skills that we need as designers, and talking and communicating, and like to always try to exercise and do the best that I can for that. So no matter what comes my way, it's always exercise and communication. It's always, no matter how complex or intimidating the tests and the whiteboarding sessions and all that may be, it's opportunity to flex those skills. So I know that's not helpful, but I think it's an optimistic twist on something that can be daunting, even for myself. So.
Yeah, I think I heard once that people are more willing to hire someone who can collaborate, someone who can build relationships, someone that people trust, someone that you care to show up at 8 a.m. with and spend 8 hours with. They would rather hire that person who has a lower skill level than to hire the person that's amazing, can do everything under the sun, but when you walk into a meeting with this person, you just want to scratch your eyes out. So there's so many questions online that you can just Google design interview. You're going to find something, and really what you can expect is those tell me about a time questions, and they're looking for collaboration. They're looking for times when you handled something difficult and how did it come about? What happened when you didn't work well with someone? How did you go about that? There's categories that they hit, and I could pick up a list of what's on our interview process, but you're likely going to see the tell us about a time when you did something. So having prepared stories for all of these situations, and they don't have to be the greatest stories. They could be about, a time when you thought that someone couldn't speak up, in Girl Scouts. And so you helped that person. It shows you as a person, and they can teach you the design stuff, but they want good people. And Frost in particular, we have an entire one interview for 30 minutes that is set on, do we think this person is someone we'd like to sit down and have a pizza with? So in my opinion, it's big at companies.
Yeah, I think something that Monique touched on as well, but that cannot be understated, is the awareness for growth. And it's like a lot of people will ask you, where do you want to grow and where do you see yourself going in the next year to 5 years or whatever? And I think if you can articulate that, it gives future employers a lot of concept on where they can help you and where they can fit you and see your longevity in the company. So I think that's something that, even I struggled with coming out of school, where it was like, I just want a fucking job. Like, sorry for swearing, but like, I just want a job, right? And like, when you get to that point, you can kind of lose sight of the greater like career path and like the craft in general. So I think being aware of like kind of a little bit of mixture of all of it, like knowing where that you don't know everything, identifying places where you can grow, and being able to articulate and communicate those to your managers can also help, if they start relating like, oh, I have experience in this and could be a really good fit for the long term. So I find it's not just for myself, but in those, interviews and things like that, it's good to communicate that, even if it's not asked. So
I think one of the, again, I think Amanda brings up a good point about being able to storytell, because that's what we're doing. We are essentially telling a story to our clients or to our audience, and we need to grab their attention. And one of the questions I like to ask in interviews is, tell me a story about yourself. That's the question. That's it. And it's really open-ended, and I'm trying to assess the person's ability to tell me a story, whether that's work-related or personal. One of the stories I like to tell to help people understand my ability to think through a problem is, I have a classic car, and I love working on it. And when it breaks down, it takes some time to figure out, well, is it mechanical or is it electrical, or it's not just a flat tire, so I can't just change that. But something's not working, so it takes some time to figure that out. And when I talk about I have a classic car, a lot of times people are like, oh, what kind of car do you have? I've already hooked them in. I've already grabbed them and made that an interesting conversation for them, and that's what you need to do. You need to be able to grab someone's attention very quickly when you're doing this kind of work, and be yourself. Don't go into an interview trying to be something or someone you're not. you're just who you are, and that's what they're looking for. That's what interviewers are looking for. They're looking, again, does this person fit into this team? Can we sit down and have a pizza with them? Can I sit down and have a beer with them after work? There might be times when we have to work late or late into the evening or on weekends. Can I spend 12, 14 hours in a day, 2 or 3 days in a row with this person? And so being yourself is a huge part.
I think there's also, you know, we're kind of talking about the piece where, and it's very important, do we like you? Like you said, do I want to cheers you later today, or do I want to punch you later today? But then there's the other set of questions, right, where we're talking about your portfolio and we're talking about you as a designer and how well you can perform what. So I think there's a few staple questions that we're going to ask during your portfolio process, and we do a portfolio review where you get to show us either a slide deck or your portfolio and walk us through it and talk us through it. So we're going to ask, what was the problem and how did you identify it? We're going to ask, what was your role? And we want to understand really what was your role. If you didn't do the illustration, put who did do the illustration or comment on that. Let us know really what you did, because if we hire you on and suddenly you're making illustrations, they look like clip art, might have a problem. And then we're going to ask you, what was the outcome? And to our point earlier, or to Monique's point earlier, where we know where you are at in your career. We know that some things are student projects, some things are nonprofit. You know, you don't have all of the resources in the world, but explaining your thought process as if you did have these resources and being able to articulate, if I had data on everything that went out, here's how I would go back and iterate on that data, or, you know, whatever it may be. We just want you to talk through that, you know, what you could do if you could. And then also adding in a little bit of what you learned, because we're looking for, can this person grow? You know, what did this person take from this project and move to the next? And how is this person continually becoming better?
So I think in terms of pre-questions before the panel, that was a bit it. We definitely wanted to keep this a bit more like open discussion as well too. So if, you know, grads have a question, put it in the chat, or even now that we're kind of having a lull in questions, you know, feel free to like kind of reach out and ask it to the panel or panelists, I guess, to give people a minute to think. What was something in interviews that you learned that really helped you become more comfortable about speaking about your projects yourself, or just like, you know, having you understand how to tell stories about yourself, like, you know, Caesar mentioned? What are some things that you picked up through, you know, multiple interviews, multiple jobs that you really reference back to now to kind of help you?
Yeah, just really being comfortable with coming out of your shell. This whole work from home thing, I think, is great because I get to be in my shell. I get to be in my little space, and I don't have to always be on or in front of somebody. So when it comes to sharing information about myself, it really is making sure I'm setting myself up for that success, to be able to talk to someone about who I am, what I do. I really am, just like many of us, I really am an introvert. And my wife says, no, you're not. You're you're like a social butterfly. And it's because I know when it's time to come out of my shell. When I'm doing work, though, when I'm doing design work, that's when I'm in my shell. I'm like, nobody bother me, because I'm focusing on something, and I just don't want to be bothered. So, you know, you just have to be able to really be comfortable with sharing information about yourself. And that's not to say that you have to share things that you're not comfortable sharing, but figure out what those parts of your life that you are comfortable sharing, and being able to talk about that, you know, again, in a very storytelling way that gets people interested. There was, when I was still teaching, I was talking about this with some students that were getting ready to graduate, and I asked the class, hey, someone tell me a story. And one of the students said, she told me the story about when she and her sister were kids, that she has this scar on her leg. It's a burn scar, and that her sister was standing next to the stove and she pushed her out of the way and she burned her leg because the pot of boiling water fell on her leg instead of in her sister's face. And I was like, wow, that's a really interesting story. Thanks for sharing. I said, but you need to learn how to tell that story. So I said, you tell it in a way that's really interesting. You almost have to be a performer. You have to say, when my sister and I were kids, we were hanging out in the kitchen, and my mom was cooking, and we were really excited about getting lunch, and we were being really impatient, and so we were bugging my mom, and she got distracted and hit the pot, and I could see the pot of boiling water, this hot, scalding, boiling water, getting ready to fall on my sister. And I don't know what happened, but I just reacted and pushed her out of the way and jumped in front of her. And this water, this excruciating pain hit my leg, and I was screaming and crying. And it was so uncomfortable. I had to go to the hospital. I had to get a skin graft. It was just really uncomfortable. But at the end, I was really happy my sister was safe and that she did not get any scars on her body. That's a much more compelling story than the way she went through it. And when she heard me tell the story, she was like, oh my God, that is so much better.
She's like, are you okay?
Yeah, exactly. So again, know what you want to share about yourself, be comfortable sharing it, and learn how to tell that story. And you learn how to, you learn this. You don't wake up tomorrow and you're like, yes, I can do that. I was not always good at this. It just took practice. It took a lot of interviews. I don't know how many interviews I screwed up, but it does take practice, and practice with yourself, practice with your friends, practice with your family. Even when you're just talking with friends or family about a certain story, like say you're hanging out with your best friend. Oh, hey, you remember that time we went on that road trip and da 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 da. Learn how to bring about those memories that help people get excited about what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's something that, like, if you can do it to yourself, you can do it when you're explaining a user story and trying to convince stakeholders that they need to do X, Y, and Z, right? Like, I think if you can make it compelling about yourself and really show, your coworkers or anybody, right, who you are, why you are this person, and that you are like a unique and really interesting person to be around, that they should want to be around, right? Then you can translate that into the work setting, and that's how you communicate these things, and you win over stakeholders, and you win business and things like that. So it's definitely applicable.
Yeah, I say recently, it was I think a year ago, we interviewed someone, and it started off really strong and really exciting, and it was something new that we hadn't seen from anyone. And it started with us saying, we want to get to know you, just give us 2 to 3 sentences about yourself. And he was like, actually, I have a quiz. So he pulled out a quiz. He only had like 3 questions maybe, and so they were all about him, multiple choice, take your guess. And we got to know him, right? We learned that he has a disability, and it's a way to, have those uncomfortable conversations where you don't want to be like, hey, I can't lift my arm above here, but here's a way in which I can do a quiz and you can learn that about me. But after those 3 questions, we were all really excited, and we were like, God, I'm so excited to see his work now. And it just fell flat after that. It's like he had practiced the quiz. He knew so much about himself. And then when it went to his work, he let it all just kind of take over him. He got the job, but it started really great, but you need to maintain that energy, because as he was talking about his work, we were just like, I'd rather learn about your arm right now. So maintain that energy. And I'm very bad at public speaking. It's something that I'm still learning how to do. And like Caesar said, it's interviewing and public speaking, it's a skill, and you don't get a skill right out of the womb. You have to build that up. And so something that helps me is when I'm creating presentation decks, or I know I'm going to speak on some topic, I specifically fit in a space where I am going to breathe. Because my problem is, and I'm doing it right now, my problem is my body tells me, we're going to freak out. Amanda, right now, your heart's going to start racing, you're going to lose your breath, and we're just going to freak out. Even though you know exactly what you want to say, you've done, months of research on this project, you're going to freak out and you're not going to know what to say. So I have to set in those times where I tell my body, stop it. We are not freaking out. We know what we're doing. So if you can plan those times, a way that I do it often is I put in my user testing videos after long periods of talk, so that it's a way for me to say, you guys go focus on this. I'm going to come over here and chill out for a second. And then I'm going to come back when I'm ready, and whenever you've still been occupied this whole time, but I've been able to take that break. So I guess the moral of the story is, don't let your body trick your mind into thinking that everything is going wrong, because really it's just your adrenaline building up, and your mind and your body are kind of confusing one another. So just relax, set in those moments where you know that you need to breathe right now. Don't be afraid to say something like, I'm just going to let you guys take a look at this for a second. Relax for a second, breathe, and come back. Allow yourself that, because that'll feel a lot better. Those silences don't feel as uncomfortable as you may think that they actually feel. Just take that step back, come in, everything will be okay.
Yeah, there's actually studies that show if you give people just 1 minute to think about what you've talked about over the last 5 or 10 minutes, they're more likely to retain it. So I think that's a good point in an interview, is just give your interviewers a chance to absorb the information you're sharing with them. And I'm going to have to jump off here in a few minutes to go to an AIGA meeting that was supposed to be last week, but they scheduled it. They rescheduled it for today. But if y'all have any questions that I can answer, please send me an email, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. Thanks for having me, Holly. Kiera, thanks. Brittany, it was so good to see you. Amanda, it was really good to see you too. Monique, it was nice to meet you. Rudy and Jennifer, it's good to see y'all. Good luck. And let me know if there's anything I can do to help, and I'll talk to y'all later.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Well, it looks like we have another question kind of popped into the chat, and it's, what can I do to stand out when applying?
Brittany, do you have something? I see you're off mute.
I was gonna say, like, there's a story that comes to mind. I think for me, a lot of my jobs have been through like networking and things like that. And I think my interest in the company and like my knowledge of sort of like the company, the questions I ask about their goals, their mission, and like what their next like year roadmap looks like. I think that's a big thing. Like, you show that you care about the company. That's a big thing. But one of the stories, and it was on like an AIGA trip that I remember when we went to McGarrett Jesse, and they were like, this person got this job because they recreated something that we did. They sent us an application that looked like a Shiner, like they built a Shiner box and sent it to us, right? At that time. That just dates when I was in school a little bit before all that shift happened, right? But for me, that sort of translated into kind of what I was saying. Like, when I show that I care about what they care about, and I'm not employed by the company, I think that is the biggest like thing that will stand out. Like if you have a knowledge, if you have a history, like looking into that company, you've invested time and energy, then it shows that you're not just out there looking for a job. I mean, you might be, right? But I think there's a due diligence that we can do. So that's kind of the parallel that I was thinking of.
So at Frost, I'm sorry, Jennifer, you're going to hear this for the second time. Her and I talked earlier this week, so I'm repeating a lot of what I've told her. But at Frost, we consider ourselves T-shaped designers, meaning if we look at a T, everyone's nodding their heads, they know what this is. I'll just repeat it in case you don't. This is a design process. You can do all of this as a designer. You know how to problem solve, how to ideate, how to solution. But your T, where the T comes down, this is where you really specialize. So at Frost, me specifically, I focus on UX writing. So all the content that is in our digital space, I love to write and I love to revise and I love to pick up my colleagues and say, I don't know what you're doing with this run-on sentence, but we're going to remove it. And then we have someone like my friend Kevin Domingo, who's also a Texas State graduate. He focuses on animation, illustration, motion, anything that's visual. He really has a really sharp eye for that. And so if you're able, and I know you guys are all really early on in your career and maybe you don't think you're good at everything. Maybe you know exactly what you can do. It'll come naturally, hopefully, as you continue to go. But if you're able to kind of say, I'm interested in this, or I'm really good at this, you're going to stick in their mind, almost like a Friends episode, right? Where it's like, what about the one with the content writing? She seemed good. You want to be able to not only stick out as a person as, that one with the dog and she just seems so funny, but you also want to be the one that's, the one that could actually add value, because we don't have anyone that writes really well on the team right now. So if you're able to specialize, you can really stand out, because you might be filling gaps that either they know they don't have anyone for, or that they didn't realize that they do need you for, because you articulated yourself so well.
And being able to communicate that vertical is key too. Like you don't want to rely on like an interviewer to see like, oh, like they kind of do this one thing in all of their portfolio that I haven't really seen. Like you want to be able to like identify that in yourself and be able to communicate that as one of your strengths and like where you want to grow and things like that. It all ties together, right? So.
And when you look from the reverse, often if a company is filling a position, it's because they have a gap. So you need to help them understand what gap you're going to fill for them and make it worth that budget money that they set aside for your salary.
I think there's also really small things you can do as well. So again, just like after doing your research and seeing the kind of work that they typically do, you can also just reorganize your case studies in your portfolio so that when those people from the company go to your book, they see the projects that are most relevant to the work that they do on a day-to-day. Easy thing to do, right? And then if you're applying maybe next week something where they have a different focus, you just reorganize them again. So really small, easy thing to do, just to kind of like catch their eyes, because sometimes, unfortunately, when you're going through these batch portfolio reviews, it's really like those first couple of minutes. And if you're seeing something that's just totally not relevant, you might not get to that like 4th, 5th case study to where things start to click. So making sure that you do the due diligence to make sure that you rise that to the top can really make the difference from, a go or no go decision.
To add to that, I think one of my biggest realizations, unfortunately, after I got a job, was that I always use metaphors and analogies, but imagine there's a bouncer at a door and you want to get inside that door. The bouncer is going to look you up and down and he's going to decide if you get to come into this door or not. That's your portfolio. Your portfolio should be a quick up and down glance. And when you enter that door, that's when you're going into your case studies. That's when you're having the in-depth conversations. So just as if you walked in with a hoodie and torn pants, he's going to look you up and down and say, no, thank you. If you come in looking like you know how to walk the talk, you're going to get let in that door.
I guess I have a question in terms of just like kind of being able to advocate for your like own personal value on top of like, your portfolio and like, what's on your resume and just your credentials as well. just a little bit like how you do it kind of in the interview and as well as, once you get into the workplace. I know personally for me, like it's just been one day in, but there's been a lot of like meeting new people and they know where I'm at skill level wise. You guys have talked a bit about of like, how to stand out, kind of how to, tell a story, kind of how to highlight these things about yourselves. When you're kind of learning with people and kind of getting to know people, how can you start to like, sow the seeds of like being able to advocate for yourself and show who you are and show where you can add value to different projects?
I think, I hope I answer this correctly. Let me know if I start veering off too far. I think something that I struggled with when I came into the workplace was I graduated at 22 and I got a job at 21. I don't know. I was young. I was in my early 20s. I was naive. I was balling on this new salary. Like I just felt so cool and, everything was going really great. But where I really struggled was between that balance of professionalism and maintaining Amanda and maintaining, what makes me a creative, what makes me playful, what makes me all of these. And I just learned over time, I became kind of the joke of, I don't want to say the joke because that sounds really bad, but I would sit on couches weird. It's a thing at Frost where everyone's like, have you ever seen Amanda sit in a chair? It's usually like, all sorts of ways. But I think what I'm trying to say is maintain who you are, what makes you creative, what makes you a person that's really fun to be around, but also be the person who gets the job done, who's always reliable, who we don't have to worry about when it comes to deadlines. It's not like, oh, Amanda got that project, like see it 2 weeks after the deadline, so maintain who you are, but also it's the professional world. There's a lot of things you can't say, can't do, can't act like. So be, I guess, aware of that when you're coming into the workplace as a young person. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, definitely a bit. I feel like I'm just kind of looking for ways that other people have really tried to, focus in on, telling like what they can bring to the table. I know I'm definitely the youngest person in my workspace by, I don't know if I would say quite a bit, but definitely in that range. And I feel like just understanding what other people are kind of doing in terms of communicating their value early on is stuff I'm kind of listening for right now, just to kind of get myself out of like that feeling of being intimidated, being the youngest, being the most junior,
So I had this problem really bad, and it wasn't until Julie came in where she was like, you're acting like a child, Amanda. That's why people are treating you like a child. And so often it's not even that people see you as the young person. They might be jealous because your skin looks great and that's not what theirs looks like anymore, whatever it may be. It's true, people do that. But oftentimes it's them seeing you how you already see yourself in this environment. So I was calling people that were much older than me ma'am and sir, because that's in, the social world. That's how I respect, people older than me. But when it comes to the workspace, you have to create that equal playing ground between you guys. Because until you also see yourself as an adult, also as someone who can sit at this table, have the conversation with everyone else, they're no longer going to see you as a child because you're no longer showing up as the child. I had a horrible time with that. It took me about 2 years to figure out I was acting like a child. And, I'm not playing with blocks at work or anything, but it's the way you act. It's the way you hold yourself. It's more obvious than you may think.
I think for me personally, I think I was really quiet at first because this was like a huge problem for me for multiple years where I just could not advocate for myself at all. Like I just didn't feel like I would just take the task that I was given and be like, this is what I deserve. This is what I can handle. They know. And I would for a long time. And I would never kind of like reach out with my interest or, things that I was strong in because I was just worried, like they know better, like they know what I can do, right? So I feel like an easy way to advocate for yourself is just to say so, right? Like you need to tell someone and identify someone that you can tell these wants and these needs to, and it might not even be your manager. It could be just a mentor, another designer that you go to and you talk about these things, right? Because on your team you might not be able to grow in every aspect that you want to because the opportunity might not be there, but it might be there on another team. So you only get there if you talk to others, if you talk about the things that you want to do, and then they'll be like, oh, well, you should talk to like Amanda over there on what so-and-so is working on this, and you could like sit in on a meeting, and then you start, and then it just gets the ball rolling. So it's hard to do, especially after just joining a team, because you don't want to seem like overambitious, but just go for it. Like they kind of expect that from you, just to like just learn and be curious. Like they want to see that. So don't hold yourself back in any way, and just try to make it known, and know that you can definitely do whatever you want to do, right? You just have to ask for those opportunities. And I think I said it in the happy hour. It's like, make sure that, I think there was a question of like, what are the kinds of things that like a junior designer could do? It's like, don't even have that mindset. Just be like, I'm a designer and I can do whatever I want to, right? Like, it doesn't matter what it is. Like, all of it's like a learning opportunity and a way to kind of grow yourself.
Yeah, I have a like example of that. When I was at my first job, I was an intern, and I had just graduated. I wanted to create like native app experiences and like really create these like really interesting, compelling, and meaningful products. And I get to my job and there's nothing on. They don't have something lined up. They say, Britt, you're gonna do blog work. You're gonna do blog art today. And I'm like, what? Blog art, what? Like okay, and at that point I said, you know what, I've always wanted to learn how to do work in 3D stuff, so I'm gonna do like download Blender, watch a few tutorials, make a concept, get it approved, and then I'm gonna try to make it, right? And so I did that, and what that did was the AR guys who were in the back office saw me in a 3D software program, and they were like, hey, do you want to like help with this thing? And before you know it, like a month later, I was leading an AR product for like a really big medical company. So it's not like, it's all these things, right? It's identify where you want to grow, be yourself, take the opportunity, like be passionate about your craft, keep pushing that no matter what, and like find a way to like just be who you are as a designer, and people will take notice, so.
Also, just on top of that, even if you don't find it anywhere, like don't be afraid to self-initiate within the company. So for me, joining T3, everybody was in Photoshop, not a single person was in Sketch. I knew I wanted to do product design. I knew it was something I wanted to do, but I had zero support because we didn't even have a UX designer role at T3 at the time. It was all art director, art direction, right? So I taught myself Sketch on the side after hours. And then one day, Slack notification goes out. They're like, does anybody know how to use Sketch? Like, we have a client who has files that were in Sketch only, and not a single person could raise their hand but me. And then like, a year later, when they finally were like, you know what, I think we actually need to invest in this product design thing, and have like product designers, I was the only internal hire that was like moved over to that team because I self-initiated that. So like I said, like if you see the opportunity in other teams, don't be afraid to reach out that way. But if you don't see it at all, don't let that stop you either. Like just continue to follow your passions outside of work as well.
Pretty sure I just learned Monique's the only reason I have a job now, but
I don't know about that, but I was
one of the main reasons.
I was one of the originals, yes.
I think also something important that we haven't commented on is you're going to be expected to ask questions to the company. You're always going to be given an opportunity to ask, whether it be, something about the company and how they're handling social issues. You're able to ask that. Or, I think people forget that they're interviewing you and you're interviewing them, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to show up 8 to 5 and you're going to have to be happy here. You're going to have to produce fulfilling work. And if, you don't align with how people are handling current events, if you don't align with how they handle work-life balance, you're not going to be happy, and you're often going to be starting this process over to start going somewhere that does make you happy. So always have questions prepared. Everyone always asks the typical, what does an average day look like for you guys? And it's a great question because it does give you insight, but often people just fall short there, and that's the end of the interview. And we don't really feel like not that you weren't prepared, but don't you have more questions? Like, don't you want to know if we can wear flip-flops to work, or don't you, you know, interview us as well?
Yeah, in like a multiple interview situation, like if you have like a recruiter or like that initial one to see if the team is even interested in pursuing further interviews, I usually ask my non-negotiables there, right? Like current events and everything, like what are the DEI initiatives that are going on? Like, have you done like an audit of your pay? Have you, you know, ensured equity across all your people? Like, what are some of the changes that are rolled out, especially now, right? I think like that's a huge thing. And, there is, especially after everything given this past week, right? I think there's a huge shift where companies are beginning to hold themselves accountable, put their money where their mouth is, really, right? So I think it's big to ask and put those non-negotiables up, right? If that's work from home capabilities, if that's the ability to travel, if it's, can you tell me some of those HR things? Like, do you have benefits? Like, what does this come with? Can you explain to me more of those? Ask those up front. And then, because you're a human and you deserve those things. So for me, I want to know that stuff before I even tell you about my process, before I even give you a peek into my mind. That's just kind of what I do. So
We had one time, we were interviewing a researcher, and we had this guy come in who had a pretty stellar resume. And when we opened up the questions to him, he said, "So it looks like the dress code is pretty lax, so I think I'll be okay." And it was such a turnoff, because we were just like, honey, you don't have this job, especially not now. So you want to ask those questions, but always watch your tone, always watch the structure of your sentences. You do need these questions for yourself, but also don't come with it as if you've already gotten this job. To answer your question, Jennifer, about how many questions you should ask, it depends. You could spend your entire time on that first question, or you could ask 5 questions. It really depends on the allotted time that they give you. So obviously prioritize your questions by importance. I think where we've seen it go bad is people say, "What does your everyday look like?" And we answer, and they're like, "Awesome." And we're like, "Anything else? do you want to know what?" So it's more of showing interest and showing that you also are here for this conversation as well. And because often we just end it and we're like, okay.
Yeah, honestly, this like the question portion is a really good indicator for the interviewer, how seriously you're taking the job. Like, because if they can see that you're asking questions and you're genuinely curious about the job versus like the really generic questions that you didn't really try, things like that, it can be a really good indicator. And then just on the flip side, just being able to also really answer the question of like, why do you want to work here? If you don't think of it won't always be asked, right? But if you can't answer that question, or you give just this really soft question, it's a huge red flag that, oh, this person just bulk applied and they're just after a job. I'd rather give it to somebody who actually really wants to be here and who's going to put in the effort. So you can also, so it's kind of that question, and then the questions that you ask at the end that can really gauge interest and kind of give us a little bit of insight of like, okay, where are they at with them really wanting to be here with us.
one of the questions that I usually ask, like myself, if I've done my research, I'm really interested in the company, if I have like, the design director or even somebody who's like an associate director, anybody, I'm always like, what are you most excited about in this next year? Like, what does the team's like roadmap look like? What are the team's goal for the next like quarter to like year? And I usually try to get them to talk more about what it is, because in those applications and like the job postings, it's like, be able to do this. And most of the times there's more specific roles that they want to fit them into, whether they fit into like, agency, it's a little different, but in-house, it's within their whole ecosystem of design, right? And so I think that's a huge one that I tend to ask a lot of like in-house people that I like apply to or anything like that. So And it shows interest. I think if you care to know, it proves longevity for them and you. And like a serious consideration of, can you see, as a designer, can you see yourself grow in that role with that company?
I think as far as interviewing the company, a question that I feel is most insightful is and it's a stereotypical question, what's your favorite part about working for this company? What's your least favorite part about working for this company? But the least favorite part is where you're going to catch on to any red flags that you might feel, especially if you're in a group interview. You might hear some consistency about, there's a lot of people to get through in order for decisions to be made. And if 5 out of 5 people say that, maybe this is something you want to reconsider. Maybe it's something you're okay with. But asking the least favorite part, granted, they in that moment are the face of the company, and they're not going to be like, the manager is just shit. But maybe you can, catch on to these red flags because, like I said, you got to show up to this job.
I think another way if you don't get the information you want from that, another good way to get the same info is to ask, what does the design team spend the most time on every day? Like, or not every day, just like overall. If they're like, we spend a ton of time trying to convince our stakeholders the value of design. Whoa, huge red flag, right? Or maybe that's something you're into. You're like, oh, stakeholder relations, I love that, right? I'll be perfect here. But, or, it'll give you some insight actually of like what some of those hangups can be for sure. Also, just side note, I think one of the best interview advice I had gotten is if you're doing multiple one-on-one interviews, ask the same set of questions from each person and see how, and then just then it's almost like a survey, right? Then you have multiple data points around the same question. That's really going to give you a really good view into the team as a whole versus if you're asking each person a different set of questions. So this is an approach that you could use for sure.
I did that with, what are you most excited about for different stakeholders? And it shows their priorities, right? Like, and their focus and what are their like key factors in hiring somebody, and like what they're looking for in the team, like to fill that role.
That kind of off topic, on topic, you will probably do a variety of interviews with a variety of roles in the company. And it's possible that you're showing the exact same content that you're showing the others, but you need to know your audience and what their goals are. So what you're showing the design team is, hey, I know how to think, I know how to collaborate with you. I'm not going to be the ball and chain of this team. I'm going to be someone who provides value to us. And then if you move on and you talk to the manager, you're talking about, I'm accountable, I'm this, I'm that. You might be giving the same presentation to all groups, but catering to your audience and letting them hear what they need to hear is crucial. And that carries over into the real world where you're giving pitches and you need to know, am I talking to a developer who speaks this language, or am I talking to marketing who speaks this language?
Holly, I saw your question in the chat. Are you referring to like recruiters as in like that are like they're hiring recruiters from like within the company that you're applying for, or like outside third-party ones that sort of connect, like Creative Circle or something like that?
Outside third-party ones, yeah.
So for me, I found, so when I was trying to leave my old job, I did that, I was doing the bulk hires, like applies on LinkedIn. I was networking, I was doing a bunch of stuff. But when you do like those LinkedIn ones, a lot of times they don't get answered because they're only added on there through their ATS. So it's an applicant tracking system. And so what that is like they do one and it sends it out multiple, and then not every inquiry is responded to. And so some of those LinkedIn ones don't necessarily get attention after a while, or they'll have like recommendations and stuff like that. So what I found with the Creative Circle, like I did it, I had direct ones sent to me. I spoke one-on-one with somebody who I was able to share my resume and talk to them about my strengths and what I'm looking for, what's worth my time, what's not worth my time, type of thing. And then they send active job openings directly to me. also to other people, but I think it's one of those where I at least got a couple interviews from them. So whereas if I just applied to it on LinkedIn, it was probably gone into a batch and just left into some of those like processing. So I think there's value in it if, you know, you find yourself, the network's a little dry, things like that, then it's worth it. And I still keep them there because I find that a lot of times they post more salary insight than like a job posting on LinkedIn does. So it keeps me updated with, say, like what companies around me are hiring with, if it's salary, if it's contract. So I kind of use it as a gauge even when I'm not looking. So I don't see there's any harm in it. I think it's another thing. I think if you have to pay for it, that's when I'd start questioning it.
If any of the other grads have any questions, if you guys want to ask those now, or if any of the mentor panelists have anything to say that they really feel like was advice or something that they learned that really helped them when kind of, you know, acing these UX interviews or just kind of getting their foot in the door, or what happens after you get your foot in the door as well.
The after part's the fun part, right? Like, I think, you know, I think being the humility aspect is a huge thing. I think collaboration, and I think that's even more important now that we're in a remote environment. You know, where I'm at in my company is we were acquired 2 years ago. And so it's in the process of merging under one. And so instead of having, you know, a 200-person company where you're all trying to align our processes and things, now you have 10 agencies coming together to try to establish one process. So I think a lot of patience is what you need right now. You need to be able to communicate. You need a lot of humility. And you need to be solution oriented is the biggest thing that I can say. You know, it's easy, and I struggle with this personally myself. You know, Holly can probably attest. I can do a lot of bitching, right? I can do a lot of complaining about a lot of different things, but it's easy to do that. It's harder to, you know, see the problem initially, and instead of just outwardly you know, react to it, to say, well, what if we did this? It could solve this problem, this problem, this problem. And it's harder to do that on the fly, but it's something that I think is a good skill to start trying to hone in, right? To not be reactionary, but to observe and try to like be proactive to the solution is a huge thing that I'm learning. You continue to learn, right, as we're in this remote environment.
A suggestion I would have as far as coming into the real world and, you know, once you've got the job, now what? Something that helped me a lot, and we are now remote, and so this may look a bit different, but when I was hired on, I immediately gravitated towards certain people with different roles. And I identified those people as, you know, in design, it was my mentor, but I had a developer that I was really close with, and he was able to talk simple terms because I don't understand code, but I need code to get something I need done accomplished. So when you're able to identify these people in a variety of roles, use them and squeeze them of all of the juice they have, because they're going to be your interpreter into their space, and what they can teach you is all but leverage in your, you need this person. And once you're able to find those people in all of their roles, when you have a question that maybe you don't understand because it's tech oriented, you can go to that person. When, you know, maybe this person that you became a friend with is really close to the CEO, and you want to understand how the CEO works because you're about to pitch in front of the CEO and you need to know what works. You need to make these alliances with people across different disciplines because it's only going to help you in the long run. So make those friends early. Don't be devious, actually make friends. But these people will help you in the end.
I guess along those lines, I mean, I know Monique mentioned that she started working in a remote space. How do you kind of go about creating like these friendships within the workspace when you are remote, when so many like calls or even chats are just so work or project centered, or even like roundtables or benefits chats? How do you create these connections with people when you're working remote?
Oh my God, it was so hard. I think Amazon was a really special circumstance because I'm only in just completely different environment that I'm used to working in that I'm only one, I'm sorry, there's only 2 designers and I'm the second one. And design on the team was actually relatively new. They hadn't had a designer on the team for, I think, over a year. And so the majority of the team was just developers, all engineers, right? So it was not only joining the team, but also saying like, I'm here and I promise I'm not going to totally disrupt your world, right? Like I want to work with you, but I don't want to like, you know, because it's a big change, right? Like, especially for your front end developers who have been working, making these decisions pretty much on their own. And now you have a designer saying like, you know, I don't like that, right? And I think a really easy way, I mean, kind of like the same message, right, is you have to be proactive rather than reactive. The team was really, really new to kind of like this remote, you know, we didn't have really all the tools. We didn't have Miro or Mural to work in. We weren't on Slack, right? Like just crazy, right? So one of the first things I did was, I'm kind of going to force you to talk to me, even though nobody came to me. I set up a one-on-one with every single person on my team. And then I like followed up with them. And I made sure that I was trying to make those personal connections. So I was like, what do you like to do like outside of work? And you know, it's weird because you're a complete stranger, but you have to force those conversations a little bit this way because of the remote nature of everything. And then just like evangelizing like, okay, I really need these tools in order to be collaborative with the team. So I was quickly like, we need some sort of like Miro or Mural on the team. We need to be on Slack so that we can talk to each other, you know, quicker, things like that. And then just encouraging kind of like those open lines of communication and being open to different forms of communication. You know, not everybody is going to be the kind that likes to jump on a Zoom call and chat, right? Like for them, they might want to just like sit with the information or, you know, so just being kind of getting feels for that and making sure that you're respectful of that and making sure that you're a good team player and you're flexible will quickly make, again, it's that T shape, right? It's like, how do you work well and play well with others, right? On top of just like the basic skill set, right? So it's just making sure that you're just, above all, just like a good human, right? And focus on the human connections on your team in whatever way possible, right? And again, if they don't exist like they did on my team, then kind of just like forcing that and just saying like, hey, what if we do a happy hour, right? I know we don't do that, right? But you know, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's something that we've done, like those in-person, you know, social things that we would normally do at the office where it's, oh, we're gonna quit work a little early today and we're gonna go down and have a beer in the kitchen. Like, replicate that. Like, you know, grab your team and say like, we did this, like we reached this milestone, like let's do this. You know, we have PD monthlies. I have weekly meetings with you know, some of the people that I've met in the cross, you know, team where I'm like, hey, I want to chat with you a little bit more about X, Y, and Z. Let's just grab a drink and, you know, just chat for a little bit, and making those times, that time for connections. And I think it is huge, you know, because for the first, you know, bulk of the like front end of going into the quarantine and like remote work, everybody was just grinding, right? They were trying to do the same thing and they didn't have that separation. They didn't like create that space for grace and like empathy with other people. And it was just like work. And all of a sudden you saw meetings all over the board where you would normally like book a time to like collaborate. Like they didn't know how to do it. So they just blocked out days. And it just didn't work. So just being patient and like being willing to put yourself out there and making time, even if it is like outside of those work hours, for those human connections is really important right now.
A suggestion I would have is it's really easy. Well, hopefully you guys are doing critiques. Hopefully you are aware of what one another is working on. So if you come across something and it's similar to what your coworker's working on, screenshot it, send it to them and say, hey, maybe you could use this as some inspiration for your project. I know you're working on this. And then maybe the alternative being you reach out to them and you say, hey, I know you're really good at writing content. I'm really struggling with this copy. Could we hop on a call and you could help me out real quick? So leaning on one another's strengths and being aware of what everyone is working on, you can spike conversations out of that. This is kind of off topic, but something, I was listening to a podcast recently and it's just like a girls podcast. So I apologize to the only male in the room, but if you can show vulnerability in something that we all experience, you can create a common ground that brings everyone back to being human rather than being coworkers in this awkward digital space. So the example that the girl gave was when she's at a party and she has no friends there that are girls and she's just kind of standing awkwardly, she'll go up to a girl and she'll ask the girl if the girl has a tampon, because we all know what that feels like. We all know how, urgent sometimes those situations are. And so if you can kind of be a human for a second and create common ground, people see you as a human and they want to help you out in that kind of situation. I don't know if you should go around asking your coworkers for tampons, but if you can bring yeah, hey, do you mind sending me? But if you can come to that common ground and kind of take the embarrassment to yourself, not too hard, don't do anything too drastic, but it kind of makes that person feel more comfortable and makes them feel like they're helping you out and they're more willing to have a conversation with you, and you can spike great relationships based off of that.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. I know we're kind of like a bit 5 minutes over. Thank you guys all so much for coming in. Caesar as well, if he sees this later, thank you for coming. Yeah, thank you guys so much. I know I've taken so much from the conversation so far, and a lot of the questions and the answers that you guys have given have been so helpful. So yeah, I mean, honestly, again, thank you for coming into the workspace. I feel like you guys hear that every time we all meet up in any in-person thing, but it's definitely been so invaluable to so many of the grads. So yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you. It means a lot getting all this advice. And trust me, I've been writing down notes. I haven't been quiet. I've been writing down everything. So
I want to just say how brilliant our alumni are, and it makes my heart grow 3 sizes bigger to see you guys out being so smart and wonderful and talented. And yeah, that's my 2 cents. So thank you guys so much for doing this. It means everything.
Just same thing here. Thank you for everything and for all the great insight. I've been also taking notes on the side, and all of these things that we've been learning throughout the week, talking to the mentors, and these chats have really helped a lot for the interview process. The first interview I had, I was a nervous wreck. I was really like struggling, and then after like having so many conversations with all of the mentors, like it made like a world of a difference for these interviews. So all of this stuff is really helpful.
That's awesome.
So thank you.
One of the things I still hold on to this day is something that I will never forget. Sorry, my partner's cooking. The fire alarm's going off. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. So one of the things I will never forget is something I was going to my first interview as an intern, and I told Holly about it, and Holly was like, just remember, no matter who you're talking to, you always have one thing in common with them, and that's that you are passionate and love design. And I think that has kept me level-headed through any anxiety, any personal situation that I went through, was going through at the time of those interviews, any insecurities that I might have, like coming up to a challenge, anything. And it's like, if you can be personable and try to connect with one of those people in that room or on that call for one thing, like it's that. And to just, you know what you're doing. You love what you do, even if you don't know everything. So just be yourself. So.
Yeah, my boyfriend was like, why are you spending an hour and a half outside of work to do something slightly work related? And I had to explain to him, whenever I was graduating, I didn't have anyone telling me how, I'm sure that even if we go into the real world, we'll probably keep some form of this because of how great we've seen it. But if I can be someone that could have helped little Amanda 4 years ago, I would love to be that. So I've already talked with Jennifer. If anyone else wants to DM me, I'm free to hop on calls. So don't be afraid to do that. I would love to help anyone and everyone in any way.
Thank you.
Yeah, same. I think I echo that. I think getting into the field was a little rough for me at first, and I didn't feel like I had a lot of that mentorship. So definitely doors open past this for anything, because the longer you go, it's just the questions never go away, right? It's always just new questions, new challenges, new things that you have to learn. So having somebody to go to is really nice. And so, yeah, don't be a stranger. Keep reaching out. Add us on LinkedIn, all that stuff.
Same. That's all I'm gonna say.
All right, well, awesome. Thank you guys so much. I think that unless there's any last minute questions, it seems like we have everything pretty wrapped up. But yes, I guess on the note of you guys saying stay in touch, if anyone thinks of any other questions, feel free to either reach out to mentors individually or into Slack channels to let everyone kind of benefit from the answers as well.
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys. Talk
Thank
soon.
you.
Thank you guys. Have a great night.
Thank you, everyone.